Hello, grade 4. Mr. Mo here, and welcome to Theme. Today is February 26th, and today we're going to be talking about renewable energy sources to produce electricity. I hope you haven't forgotten all the non renewable sources that we reviewed last time. So, let's get into it, shall we? Right, before we get into it, let's talk about some of the non renewable energy sources we talked about last class. We talked about coal burning, carbon cycle gas turbines, or CCGT, and we also talked about nuclear power as well. So let's talk about some renewable energy sources. But first, let's talk about our aims and success criteria. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe what a renewable source of energy is to produce electricity. You should be able to identify what makes energy sources renewable, and that you can name some of the renewable methods of power generation. And also that you should be able to explain renewable methods of power generation. Keep that in mind as we go forward. So let's put on our thinking caps. What do we think renewable energy is? You can look at both pictures to give you some ideas. So hopefully we recognize these two pictures. One is a wind farm and the other is a solar farm. Wind farm uses the power of the wind to spin those blades to generate electricity, where a solar farm uses the power of the sun and solar cells to produce its electricity. So what does renewable energy mean? Renewable energy is energy that never runs out. We will always be able to use this type of energy. First, let's talk about wind power and how it generates electricity. So, as you can imagine, we need wind. So, when wind blows, the blades turn. As the blades turn, the main shaft, which is connected to the gearbox is important like a car. It starts slow and speeds up as it goes. The gearbox increases speed to around 1500 RPMs, or revolutions per minute. That's how many times it spins around in 1 minute. Now, the shaft turns a generator, which generates the electricity. That's how we produce electricity, just like all other forms that we've studied. And just like all other power sources, the electricity is carried along power lines to the tower or to any other grid that needs the supply of electricity. Right, so let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of wind power. Some advantages. Once the wind turbines are built, running costs are very low. Also, it doesn't produce any CO2, so it's very clean. The land that occupies the wind farm can still be used for farming. Also, wind is a renewable source of energy, so it will never run out. And wind farms are safe and easy to build. But there are some disadvantages. Wind turbines must be shut down in very strong winds or very weak winds. They can only be built in certain areas. Some areas just aren't windy. And not everyone likes to look at a wind farm. It's not the most amazing thing to look at. And to add, migrating birds sometimes have problems and run into the turning fans, which does create a problem. Right, moving on to solar. Solar can be used in two basic ways, the one on the left and the one on the right. So the one on the left is your traditional way of generating solar power. The sun shines on the solar panel, usually located on the roof of any building or field. Photovoltaic cells inside the panels convert the sun's energy into electrical energy. And the electricity can either be used or carried out on the power lines to the national grid for everybody to use. So the one on the right side is what people forget about. Some solar panels are used to provide heating. The sun shines on the solar panel, usually located on the roof of a building. Water inside the panel is heated, and then that water is pumped around the house to keep the house warm. That's a nice way of using the sun. But there are advantages and disadvantages of solar power. So, some advantages. Solar energy is renewable and the sun's heat and light are free. The sun has been there for billions of years and will probably be there for a few billion years too. So it's a nice energy source. Solar energy can be used to generate electricity in remote places that usually are far away from communities, so it's a nice handy way of keeping that iPhone charged. It does not produce any CO2, it is very clean, and energy is usually generated at or near the location that's being used, so transmission cost is very low. Some disadvantages are that PV cells just don't work when it's cloudy or nighttime, so you have to generate your power on a sunny day, otherwise you're out of luck. The UK is not very sunny, so solar power isn't very convenient for them to use. So the last energy source we're going to use today is biomass. So in the folder, Mr. Mo has put two videos. One is a biomass song, and the other one talks about what biomass is. I want you to pause my video to watch those two videos in the folder now. So I hope you enjoyed the video and the song, but what is important is we understand what biomass is. So is this a renewable energy source? Well, yes, because the stuff that we use is grown. Can you imagine cutting down a tree and burning the tree? That tree has been sucking in CO2 its whole life. So when you burn the wood, it's releasing all the energy that it consumed its whole life. We call that carbon neutral. That's where the plant's life is releasing its energy that it consumes, so it's considered zero. So, number two, how is this method similar to non-renewable? A lot of people look at burning things as a bad way of producing energy because of the black smoke. But in reality, it's only releasing what it consumed. Now, if we look at something like coal, coal is hundreds of millions of years old. And when we burn that, it's releasing the chemicals that were in the atmosphere long ago. So it's much, much worse. Now, in the folder, Mr. Mo has put some optional work that you can do at your house. This is a fun activity if you have all the stuff at home. I know right now it's very difficult to find some of these things. So if you have all of these things, you can go ahead and try to make a hydropower plant in your house. Very fun experiment. Right, moving on, let's talk about passive homes. Passive homes are energy efficient homes that use little or no electricity or heating in the house. They are built in certain ways to utilize their environment so they don't have to waste on electric bills or heating bills to stay comfortable. For example, this house faces the sun and is very super insulated, keeping all the heat inside and the cold outside. The cool air from the outside is drawn in and heated using energy that the house produces itself using solar power. Also, there are lots of large windows that allow the heat from the sun to come in and warm the house naturally. A log burner is used to burn wood to keep the house warm in the wintertime. Remember, that's carbon neutral, not any new CO2 into the atmosphere. It also has solar panels to heat the water in the house so you don't have to use a boiler to take a warm shower. Very efficient. And finally, the house is draft free. There are no little cracks. There's not even a letterbox that lets cold air in. It seals all cracks in the house. Last bit of optional homework, but should be mandatory homework because this involves mom and dad buying you a pizza because you need the pizza box to do this experiment. If you have the items, you can make a solar power oven box. Take pictures, send them to Mr. Mo, and enjoy the pizza. So to wrap up, guys, today's aims were to explain renewable energy sources of electricity. You should be able to identify what makes an energy source renewable. You should be able to name some of the renewable methods that we discussed today. And you should be able to explain the methods of power generation. We will review all these answers before next lesson, which is tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Have a lovely, lovely day. Take care.